This is the satellite image they tried to bury. Pull it up. Satellite footage, time-stamped Friday, April 11th, 2026, 6:47 a.m. Gulf Standard Time. 230 oil tankers sitting dead in the water inside the Persian Gulf, not moving, not loading, not earning, just floating there like coffins in a bathtub. And beyond them, through that narrow choke point where 20% of the world's oil supply is supposed to flow every single day, the Strait of Hormuz sits under a joint naval blockade, the likes of which the modern world has never seen. For the first time in history, Saudi Arabia and Israel, two nations that do not even have formal diplomatic relations, have coordinated military, intelligence, and economic operations to dismantle Iran's 40-year stranglehold over the most critical energy corridor on Earth. This is not a theory. This is not speculation. This is happening right now, and it is reshaping the balance of power in the Persian Gulf in ways that will define the next generation of geopolitics. And it is happening against the backdrop of simultaneous crises that would each on their own qualify as a generational emergency. We are talking about a shooting war between the United States, Israel, and Iran that has already killed thousands and cost hundreds of billions of dollars. We are talking about Brent crude surging past $100 a barrel, a gain of 40% since February 28th, with West Texas Intermediate climbing to $104. We are talking about a nuclear power plant at Bushehr struck 4 times in 5 weeks, with the closest impact landing 75 meters from an operational reactor containing thousands of kilograms of nuclear material. We are talking about a ceasefire that collapsed in Islamabad on April 12th. We are talking about the Revolutionary Guard's entire fast attack fleet crippled at its home port. We are talking about major shipping companies Maersk, CMA CGM, and Hapag-Lloyd suspending all transits. And we are talking about the complete unraveling of a doctrine that Iran spent decades and billions of dollars constructing beneath reinforced mountain complexes. In this report, we are going to break down exactly how Saudi Arabia and Israel pulled off the unthinkable. We are going to trace the chain of events from the February 28th decapitation strike to the April 4th Bushehr devastation to the naval blockade announced this week. We are going to show you the financial hemorrhage, the diplomatic earthquake, and the military collapse that has left Tehran more exposed than at any point since the 1979 revolution. And we are going to explain what comes next, because the next 72 hours may determine whether the Persian Gulf sees a generation of peace or a catastrophic escalation that drags the entire global economy into the abyss. Buckle up. To understand how we arrived at this moment, you have to go back to Saturday, February 28th, 2026. That morning, while Iran's top military and intelligence leaders were gathered in the National Security Council offices in Tehran for what they believed was a routine security briefing, United States and Israeli forces launched a coordinated surprise attack under the operational codename Epic Fury. According to reports reviewed by multiple intelligence agencies, American and Israeli military intelligence had identified that senior Iranian leaders, including Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei himself, would be gathered at 3 separate locations that could be struck simultaneously. The precision was devastating. Khamenei was killed. Multiple senior IRGC officials were eliminated in a single coordinated wave. The decapitation was total, surgical, and irreversible. Sources inside the Pentagon confirmed within hours that what they described as a large amount of Iranian leadership had been neutralized. According to the Washington Post, this strike came after weeks of intensive lobbying by both the Israeli government under Prime Minister Netanyahu and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, who reportedly made multiple direct phone calls to President Trump urging him to act. Saudi Arabia officially denied involvement. But here is what you need to understand. The intelligence coordination, the shared airspace calculations, the parallel military positioning pointed to a level of behind-the-scenes alignment between Riyadh and Jerusalem that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. According to the Times of London, Saudi Arabia had even tested the ability to stand down its air defenses to allow strikes to pass through its airspace. But here is the catch. What happened on February 28th was the detonator on a chain reaction nobody fully anticipated. Iran's response was immediate, massive, and directed not just at Israel and America, but at the entire Gulf region. Tehran launched hundreds of missiles and drones at U.S. bases across 6 countries. Bahrain's Naval Forces Central Command headquarters was hit. The Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar was targeted. Camp Behring in Kuwait took strikes. Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia was attacked. According to CENTCOM assessments, damage to U.S. regional installations reached approximately $800 million within the first 2 weeks alone. Iran struck Qatar's gas fields, taking offline 18% of Qatar's gas production potentially for 5 years. Iran hit the Jebel Ali port in Dubai, the region's largest maritime hub. Iran targeted desalination plants providing 99% of drinking water in Kuwait and Qatar. This was not a proportional response. This was an attempt to burn the house down, and then Iran played its ultimate card. On Thursday, March 4th, 2026, Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz, not a partial restriction, a full closure. Shipping dropped from over 100 vessels per day to 0. Brent crude, trading at $73 a barrel on February 27th, surged past $120 by mid-March. Oil production across Kuwait, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE collectively dropped by 10 million barrels per day by March 12th. War risk insurance premiums for tankers skyrocketed from 0.125% to 0.4% of vessel value, adding $250,000 per passage for a single supertanker. The International Energy Agency described this as the greatest global energy security challenge in history. The cascade went far beyond oil. The maritime blockade triggered what analysts called a grocery supply emergency across the Gulf states, which rely on the strait for over 80% of their caloric intake. By mid-March, 70% of the region's food imports were disrupted, forcing retailers to airlift staples and triggering consumer price spikes of 40 to 120%. Global fertilizer prices surged 15 to 20%, threatening the spring planting season across the Northern Hemisphere. Iran was charging tolls of over $1 million per ship for the few vessels it allowed through. This was not just an energy crisis. It was a food crisis, a water crisis. The logistical architecture of the modern Gulf economy was imploding in real time. Before we go further, if this kind of deep dive, no nonsense analysis matters to you, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. It takes 2 seconds and it ensures you never miss a breakdown like this one, because what we are about to explain next, the convergence of Saudi and Israeli operations, is the part of this story that mainstream outlets are barely touching, and it changes everything. Here is what nobody was talking about while the markets cratered. Behind the scenes, according to multiple European officials speaking on condition of anonymity, Saudi Arabia had activated a diplomatic back channel to Tehran with extraordinary urgency. Riyadh was delivering a message that contained both a carrot and a steel-tipped arrow. The carrot was mediation through Pakistan and China. The arrow was a warning. Sources say Saudi Arabia told Iran directly that if attacks on Gulf infrastructure continued, the kingdom would be forced to retaliate, individually or collectively, through the Gulf Cooperation Council framework. The GCC subsequently affirmed its members' right to respond in self-defense. That is not diplomatic language. That is an ultimatum dressed in silk. Meanwhile, Israel was prosecuting a separate but synchronized military campaign that went far beyond the initial decapitation strike. Satellite imagery released by CENTCOM shows the systematic destruction of over 66% of Iran's missile, drone, and naval production sites and shipyards. The Choka Balk drone facility in western Iran was leveled. Radar systems at the Zahedan Air Base near the Pakistani border were knocked out. Aircraft at Shiraz Air Base were scorched and destroyed. The two facilities sit 800 to 900 miles apart, underscoring the extraordinary reach of the coordinated strikes. According to Fox News satellite analysis, thick smoke plumes were visible rising above Tehran itself. This was not a single punch. This was a systematic siege, and the most devastating blow was still coming. It gets worse. Friday, April 4th, 2026, approximately 2 a.m. local time. Underground ammunition depots beneath Bushehr Naval Base, Iran's largest military installation on the Persian Gulf coast, begin to detonate in sequence. Secondary explosions ripple for hours through a tunnel complex carved into the mountain, reinforced with multiple layers of concrete and steel. The smoke is visible from satellite orbit. CENTCOM subsequently confirmed that the Shahid Mahalati naval boatyard, responsible for manufacturing and repairing the fast attack craft that formed the backbone of Iran's asymmetric naval strategy, had been severely damaged. CENTCOM described the facility as representing a significant portion of Iran's small boat production and maintenance capacity. Not a setback, not a dent, a foundational loss. And sitting exactly 75 meters from the nearest impact crater was the Bushehr nuclear power plant, Iran's only operational commercial reactor, jointly operated by Iranian personnel and hundreds of Russian Rosatom employees who had been living there with their families. The IAEA confirmed a projectile struck close to the plant's premises, killing one member of the physical protection staff and causing structural damage through shockwaves and fragments. IAEA Director General Grossi expressed deep concern and warned that nuclear sites in nearby areas must never be attacked. 75 meters. The width of a competitive swimming pool is 50. You are talking about a distance shorter than a soccer field between a military strike and thousands of kilograms of nuclear material. No radiation leak has been detected. For now. Now let me explain what this means for the Strait of Hormuz, because this is the variable that governs everything. For 40 years, Iran's ability to threaten Hormuz was the ultimate deterrent. The fast attack boats, the coastal defense missiles, the mine-laying capability, the drone coordination center, the logistical backbone for all of it was Bushehr. That infrastructure has been functionally destroyed. Iranian naval patrol activity declined sharply following April 4th. Military engineers estimate the tunnel repairs alone will take years, not months, and that is under optimal conditions, not under crippling sanctions that restrict access to specialized mountain engineering equipment. The doctrine of underground invincibility was tested that night. Advanced penetration munitions breached structures designed specifically to withstand conventional bombardment. The precedent is now set, and it is devastating for Tehran. If Bushehr's tunnels were cracked, what does that mean for Natanz, for Fordo, for every missile depot buried across the Iranian plateau? These facilities are all products of the same doctrine. Each is different in depth and rock composition, but the assumption that underground infrastructure is untouchable has been fundamentally questioned. Iran is not just reassessing one naval base. It is being forced to question the foundational logic of its entire defense architecture. As one military analyst noted, the secondary explosions that rang out for hours on April 4th told a very different story than the one Iran had been broadcasting to the world for decades. This is where the Saudi-Israeli convergence becomes extraordinary. There is no signed treaty, no joint press conferences. What there is, according to leaked assessments reviewed by intelligence analysts, is the most sophisticated shadow coordination since the Cold War. Saudi Arabia's role has been economic and diplomatic. The kingdom activated its east-west pipeline, connecting the Abqaiq processing facility with the Red Sea port of Yanbu, bypassing Hormuz entirely. Saudi Aramco's Abqaiq facility, the world's largest crude stabilization plant, providing around 5% of global oil supplies, became a lifeline. Riyadh deepened defense pacts with Pakistan, finalized security agreements with Turkey to boost domestic drone production, and positioned itself as the indispensable diplomatic intermediary. Israel's role has been purely kinetic and intelligence-driven. The targeting data for the Bushehr strike, the identification of Khamenei's location, the mapping of underground tunnel ventilation systems, all bear the hallmarks of Israel's signals intelligence apparatus working in parallel with American ISR capabilities. Sources familiar with the operational planning say that without the Israeli intelligence contribution, the precision of the underground strikes would not have been achievable. Two nations operating from opposite ends of the strategic spectrum converging on a single objective, the dismantling of Iran's Hormuz leverage. Nobody is saying the words out loud, but the satellite feeds don't lie. Here is the worst-case scenario that keeps defense planners awake at 3 a.m. Iran cornered, its underground doctrine shattered, its supreme leader dead, its naval fleet crippled, decides it has nothing left to lose. The new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, authorizes an escalation designed not to win, but to punish, a coordinated attack on Gulf desalination plants, a deliberate provocation at the Bushehr reactor, forcing a radiological event that would place Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and the UAE within the potential fallout zone. A simultaneous surge of proxy operations through Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Shia militias in Iraq designed to overwhelm American force posture across 5 theaters at once. This is not fantasy. The pattern of targeting civilian infrastructure is already established. Rosatom has begun evacuating its personnel, 198 people in the largest single wave, because even Russia recognized the threshold had been crossed. The ceasefire tells the story of a nation negotiating from damage rather than strength. On Tuesday, April 8th, the United States and Iran agreed to a 2-week ceasefire brokered by Pakistan. Iran accepted but rejected an earlier 45-day proposal, presenting its own 10-point plan demanding permanent security guarantees, war reparations, and sovereignty recognition over the strait. Vice President Vance led the American delegation in Islamabad. He said the Iranians wanted a deal. By Saturday, April 12th, Vance announced the talks had failed. Iran refused to commit to nuclear disarmament. Within hours, Trump declared a naval blockade. Brent climbed back to $102. The IRGC warned that any approaching military vessel would meet a severe response. And here is a detail that should terrify every energy trader on Earth. According to reports, Iran may have lost track of mines it planted in the Strait of Hormuz, meaning it is physically unable to fully reopen the waterway, even if the political will existed. U.S. Navy destroyers entered the strait for the first time since the war began, conducting what CENTCOM describes as mine clearance operations. The Iranian Navy released a map indicating mined areas and designating alternative shipping lanes, but shipping executives told CNBC they have received no guarantees about crew safety. Sultan Al Jaber, CEO of Abu Dhabi's national oil company, said it plainly on April 9th. The Strait of Hormuz is not open. Access is being restricted, conditioned, and controlled. That is not a ceasefire. That is a chokehold with slightly loosened fingers. And there is another dimension that nobody is connecting. Bushehr was not purely a conventional military installation. It was part of the logistical infrastructure feeding Iran's regional proxy network. Weapons supply chains to the Houthis in Yemen, to Hezbollah in Lebanon, to Shia militias in Iraq. Components of those chains pass through underground storage facilities like those beneath Bushehr. The destruction of those stockpiles has degraded not only Iran's own retaliatory capabilities, but its ability to transfer weapons and ammunition to its proxies at previous rates. Iran's retaliatory actions following the April 4th strike were notably more limited than those after February 28th. That contrast is being closely studied by every intelligence service in the region. History teaches us that cornered powers are the most dangerous actors on the world stage. The Weimar Republic, stripped of military capacity after Versailles, did not accept diminishment. It radicalized. Imperial Japan, facing an oil embargo in 1941, did not negotiate. It attacked Pearl Harbor. The Soviet Union, watching its empire crumble in 1991, did not go quietly. Argentina in 1982, its junta-facing economic collapse, launched the Falklands invasion as a desperate gamble. Iran today sits at a similar inflection point. Its deterrence has been fundamentally shaken. The Hormuz card has been degraded to a level that rewrites every calculation in every Gulf capital, every insurance office, every trading floor on Earth. This is not just a military story. This is the stress test of the post-1979 Middle Eastern order. For 46 years, the architecture of the Persian Gulf was built on a set of assumptions. America provides the security umbrella. Iran provides the threat. The Gulf states pay for both. That architecture is collapsing. Saudi Arabia is building independent defense capacity. Israel has moved from shadow operations to overt kinetic campaigns. The GCC states are deepening cooperation on missile defense and intelligence sharing in ways unimaginable 2 years ago. We are in uncharted waters and the maps are useless. Sultan Al Jaber of Abu Dhabi's national oil company stated publicly that what is happening constitutes global economic warfare through the targeting of energy infrastructure. He is not wrong. The economic damage extends far beyond the Gulf. European economies dependent on Gulf LNG are scrambling for alternatives. Asian manufacturing hubs that rely on Gulf crude are rationing supply. American consumers are paying over 50 a gallon at the pump for the first time in years, and fertilizer shortages threaten to drive food prices higher through 2027. This is not a regional conflict. This is an economic contagion spreading through every supply chain on the planet. The European Union, vocal about Russian military activity near Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, has been largely silent on Bushehr, an asymmetry Iran's foreign minister has pointedly noted. Russia, Iran's own strategic partner, publicly condemned the attacks near a reactor it helped build and evacuated its personnel. When your closest ally pulls its people out of your nuclear facility and issues public condemnations, the isolation is not theoretical. It is operational. The IAEA continues monitoring Bushehr and Iran's other nuclear sites under active war conditions. The enrichment center at Fordow is being watched. The heavy water plant at Iraq sustained severe damage in a late March strike and is no longer operational. The entire constellation of Iran's nuclear infrastructure now operates under the shadow of war. So what should you be watching in the next 72 hours? Watch the U.S. Navy mine clearance operations in the Strait. Watch the 230 loaded tankers trapped in the Gulf, where every day costs hundreds of millions in delayed crude spiking premiums and cascading supply disruptions hitting gasoline, fertilizer, and food prices worldwide. Watch Bushehr, where the next projectile within 75 meters of that reactor changes every government's calculus overnight. Watch Tehran, where satellite imagery shows Iranian forces clearing rubble from underground missile base entrances during the ceasefire, reconstituting the very capability America just spent billions destroying. And watch the space between Riyadh and Jerusalem, where two capitals that officially do not speak to each other continue running the same threat assessments and arriving at the same conclusion. The doctrine of underground invincibility, the centerpiece of Iranian strategic planning for 4 decades, has been placed under a question mark that may never be erased. Bushehr was the most visible, most dramatic, most consequential test of that doctrine. And on the night of April 4th, 2026, the secondary explosions that echoed for hours through those mountain tunnels may have been the sound of an era ending. The tankers sit motionless in the Gulf. The mines float unmarked in the Strait. The reactor hums 75 meters from a crater. Iran's grip on Hormuz is broken. What replaces it will shape the price of oil, the stability of nations, and the safety of 250 million people who live within fallout range of a reactor that has already been hit 4 times. The history books are being written this week, not this month, this week. Subscribe to this channel. Turn on your notifications, because the next chapter of this story is not waiting for anyone, and neither should you.